This show is all about interviewing interesting people and learning. It is normal to be curious about death and dying. And my guest today is a New York Times best-selling author, and she is known as Hospice Nurse Julie. She has made a name for herself on TikTok, and she is passionate about educating people about dying, and specifically what happens to people who are dying in hospice care. Now, she has made a number of videos on TikTok. That's where she became famous, and those videos have turned into millions of views and millions of followers, and then, well, that's turned into a book deal. Hospice Nurse Julie, or Julie McFadden, is joining me now. Julie, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi.
Yeah. So
what an intro. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we talk about just kind of some of the videos that, people are watching, they're seeking your content. Why did you get into nursing in the first place? Aside from hospice nursing, just nursing in general.
Yeah, I mean, nursing in general, it was my second degree. So I have a degree in psychology. And then honestly, I was young and a best friend was doing her nursing degree. Something had happened at a job I had prior where someone got hurt. It really frightened me. I saw nurses on the unit running towards this really scary event that I ran away from. And that, between my friend doing nursing school and these nurses running towards this scary event that I couldn't believe that they were like running towards to help this person, those two things made me be like, maybe I want to try nursing, right? And then I went into nursing school and I really fell in love with biology and everything that has to do with nursing. I fell in love with it. So that started my nursing career.
And then why specifically hospice, and what drew you to hospice?
Yeah, I mean, never in a million years was I planning for that, really. I went to the ICU, which is the intensive care unit, which is really like the opposite of hospice. It's where we're trying to keep people alive at all costs, it seems. And that experience, I was there for probably almost 8 years in the ICU, and being an ICU nurse, seeing us trying to preserve life at all costs made me second guess, some of the things that we were doing to, like, quote unquote help. I was thinking, I don't know if this is really helpful. There has to be a better way. If we're going to die, there has to be a better way, which led me to hospice.
It's so interesting because you have said that and frankly, it is. The perception is that if you were in hospice care, it would be extremely depressing. But you have said that is not the case at all. In fact, you have said that it is even beautiful at times. Talk about that. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, so many of my followers ask me, like, how do you do it? Or like, how do you take care of yourself? And of course, I still take care of myself. Anyone at any job needs to have good boundaries and take care of themselves. But I think my experience in the ICU, seeing people die in a hospital bed with tubes and machines attached to them, it did something to me, So when you see someone dying a natural death, they're dying from some disease, but naturally in their home, surrounded by loved ones, friends, family, it doesn't feel sad. It doesn't feel sad. I mean, every once in a while things happen. Of course, it feels there's sadness there, but I just believe in it so much that it doesn't feel hard to me. Doesn't feel hard.
I think a lot of people do have, someone in their family who maybe has had cancer, or where they have chosen to go home and pass that way. So I think that a lot of people can relate to that. How long have you been a hospice nurse?
Around 8 years.
Okay.
I need to really go back and like try to figure it out, but around 8 years. Yeah.
And really your mission is to educate people about the process of dying. And when did kind of this TikTok thing start?
Gosh.
Because I read that you weren't even really on social media at all.
No, I mean, I truly mean it when I say, like, it is still beyond what I ever could have imagined. So I was on social media as like my regular self, you know, just like anyone else, Facebook, Instagram, just a little bit. And then I went home to see my nieces, who are like of TikTok age, or so I thought, you know, they were teenagers, and they were on TikTok and they were doing dances and trying to teach me to do dances in their TikTok videos. And of course, like I'm their like 40-year-old aunt who's just like trying to have fun with them. So I spent all week at home doing stuff with them on TikTok. And then I got on TikTok so I could watch their TikToks. And when I got on TikTok, I saw that there were people, you know, my age, you know, talking about really cool things like space and like gardening and things that I really liked. And I thought TikTok's kind of cool. I'm going to make some videos. This is honestly how it went. I'm going to make some videos about death and dying because I talk about death and dying all the time throughout my day. And I like talking about it, educating about it. And I'm telling you, I mean, 3 or 4 videos in, the first one went viral.
Wow.
Like, and I had 10,000 followers overnight, and it just kept doing that. Just kept doing that.
Yeah, the one that I saw was when you talked about some of the weird things that happen at the end of life. Was that the one that just went viral? Which one that first took off?
No, the first one was very odd. I can't explain it. I was talking about the most amazing book ever. If you don't have it, go get it. It's by Barbara Carnes. It's called Gone From My Sight. It's a 13-page like pamphlet book that we give all of our hospice patients that really gives a great short little just short education about what to expect with the dying process. And I had that book behind me and I just talked about it in the video. And next thing you know, it was going viral. Truly no rhyme or reason. I don't know.
Yeah. You use the terms a lot, actively dying.
Yes.
When do you know that someone is there? How does the hospice team know? Because you hear that often, that the hospice team, they just know that they're there.
Yes. So the actively dying phase is the last phase of life. And it's very obvious, especially to hospice workers, what it looks like. So I always say, like, the further you are from death, even if it's a few months away, which sounds very short to some people, but a few months away, it's a little more gray. It's hard to tell. How far are they away from death? How close are they to death? But once you get closer and closer and closer, and then you get to that actively dying phase, which I'll explain in a second, it's pretty obvious. You know, the person, almost everyone looks the same, which is unconscious. So they are not alert and oriented. They are unconscious. You know, they'll have changes in breathing, which is very distinct to the actively dying phase. Changes in skin color, changes in body temperature, and then that gurgly breath that many people hear. They call it the death rattle. So there's very distinct things that happen during the actively dying phase that cue us in as medical, you know, as healthcare professionals, that this is the stage they're in.
We talked about the weird things that happen at the end of life, the video anyway, that I saw. Can you talk about some of those things that you mentioned in that video that people are just frankly curious about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important we talk all about all of the things that can happen during the dying process that are natural, even if they're weird or scary or gross, right? And because in the movies, they just show someone like giving a beautiful monologue about their life and then like closing their eyes and dying. And that's just not how it goes. So then when you see it with your loved one, you're like, what the heck is this? You know, it's really, really scary. So not all the time, but sometimes, you know, there can be fluid coming out of people's mouths, noses. The fluid can look foamy or green or black. That's just one of the things, right? And it doesn't happen with everybody, but it can happen. And if you don't know what that is terrifying.
Yeah.
And really, all it is stomach acid for the most part. Stomach bile is green or black, sometimes cream. Sometimes it can be foamy, and we have sphincters in our body that keep all of our fluids where they're supposed to be, right? Throughout our life, which is amazing. And when we die, all of those things relax. So things can come up. Things can come up and come out of the mouth. And if you don't know that, it is wildly scary or wildly gross, or, it's just jarring. So it's like, I want to talk about like the good, the bad, the ugly. We need to educate people so they can, I think education decreases fear, right? Decreases fear. So they can be fully present with their loved one during a very sacred time.
Right. Do you think your content has resonated with so many people because just the curiosity, or because folks are going through it, or they've gone through it, or all of the above?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. Truthfully, I'm just as surprised as everybody else, because I think when you're in my day-to-day life as like me, Julie McFadden, being a real hospice nurse, my friends and family didn't necessarily want to hear about my day, So I think there's something about it being like, so I was surprised when like people online did want to hear about my day. So I think there is something about the separation, like the social media separation, that kind of helps you digest the information maybe a little better. And I think people are curious, we're all going to die. I know we live in a society that really makes us want to believe we're not, but we are. And it's one of the biggest mysteries of life. So I think we're really curious about it. So when you meet someone like me or anyone else who works in hospice who isn't afraid to like talk about it, say the word dead, dying, death, I think it perks some people's ears up, and they want to learn more. That's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. And I think too, what also makes so many people curious is the talk of afterlife. And you also have a video too about that, and your kind of theory about that, and what you have seen, and the discussion of, well, maybe you're not gonna fear it if you think about what is going to be happening post-death, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, I never try to like push my beliefs, because we don't really know. I know enough to know we don't really know what happens after we die. But I like to express like what I believe, right? And it will either resonate with you or not, and at least help you start exploring, well, if you don't believe what I believe, what do you believe, if anything? And I think even if you don't believe that anything happens after you die, right? I still think it's important to discuss it, talk about it, plan how you want your death to look, be, if you actually have that control. Some people do, some people don't. It just, from my experience, talking about all things death related, pre-death, dying, afterlife, right? All of those things help you live better and die more peacefully. That has been my experience watching my patients who have died.
Yeah. There's been some debate too about, and I know you've talked also about people reaching, before they're going to pass. The death stare, the reach.
Yeah.
What are they looking at? There might be some discussion about, maybe a person who's already passed. And there is some debate about, is someone hallucinating? Is someone actually going somewhere? Are they going to a tunnel? Where are they going?
Right.
What do you say to someone about that, or to a family member who might be asking a question like that?
I usually educate. Like my job is so much education, and the education portion of that is, at the end of life, there is a whole thing on hospice called like deathbed phenomena, right? There are sections of this that we don't fully understand, but we know it happens enough with most of our patients that we talk about it, right? And one of those things, or a few of those things, are like the death reach, where it looks like someone's reaching up, they see somebody and they're reaching, they're smiling, maybe they say, "Hi, Mom," maybe they don't say anything. Or they actually see one of their loved ones or an old pet that has died, and they'll say, "Hey, I see so-and-so. They're right here. They're next to me holding my hand." Those things happen, right? So they're called deathbed phenomena. There's a few of them that exist. And us as hospice workers specifically, I wouldn't say healthcare workers, because as an ICU nurse, I did not see these things. But as a hospice nurse, I have seen these things.
Wow.
And we don't know why it happens, but we do know some of the, like some people will say, oh, it's because they have low oxygen in their brain, so they're starting to hallucinate. We do know that's false. That's not true. Most people who vision, reach, have the death stare, start talking to people who aren't there, they are, maybe a month from death. They don't have low oxygen yet. They aren't starting new medications. As a healthcare professional, I know what like delirium looks like, terminal agitation, where people might see things, right? And they're kind of scared and agitated because they're seeing things. Visioning, or like the death stare, the death reach, those things look much different. The people who are experiencing it act much different. This is a very comforting thing for them. So I don't know what it is, or we as a like healthcare population don't know what it is, but we also do know that it's not certain things that some people think it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah. But I love it. I mean, to me, it's so comforting. If it brings you comfort, go for it. Who cares what it is? That's what I think. Who cares? If you're comforted by it, whatever you believe it. That's what I think.
Can you share the craziest story that you did the video about the woman who said goodbye? And I don't know if you remember that video or not. It might be way back in the vault. I don't know, but I watched that video and I was like, wow.
I don't want to give away
all your
what
content.
Happened. So maybe you can give me more context clues, because there's a couple people I think of. Maybe the person who kind of knew what was going on.
Correct. Correct.
Yes.
Yes, that one.
That was one of my. I have a few crazy stories, and that is one of my craziest.
Yes.
I think. Again, another medical phenomenon where people seem to be able to choose and know when they're going to die. Now, I will say, out of all the ones I've seen this one like the least, especially when it's very, very specific like this. But so yes, this woman comes onto hospice, and she almost didn't make it on, meaning like we didn't know if she was like really 6 months from death or not. It was kind of hard, but she was elderly. She had a terminal illness. So we were like, you know what, let's do a trial run. Maybe we'll end up taking her off hospice because she does well, but she needs the help. So we put her onto hospice, and she had a caregiver and her son, who was disabled, who also was cared for by this caregiver. And I think she was on for like a week or so. And one morning, right before I started work, I get a call from the caregiver who says, you have to come visit, so-and-so died. And I was like, what? She died? What happened? Did she decline? Like, did I miss something during the week? And she was like, no, you're not going to believe this. Just come over here. So I went over to do the death visit, because she had died. And the caregiver said, last night we were doing like our normal tradition where we make blueberry muffins, and we were talking and having fun. And all of a sudden she just stopped and said, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. And I didn't really think much of it. So I went to go say goodnight to her. And when I went to go say goodnight to her, she just said, listen, thank you for taking care of me. Promise me you'll take care of my son. I love you. Like, thank you. Promise me you'll take care of my son. Promise me. And she was like, what are you talking about? Of course, I'm here for you and your son. I'll always take care of you guys. She goes, okay, thank you. Well, I'm tired and I'm going home.
Wow.
And she thought she was confused. She goes, you are home. What do you mean you're going home? And she goes, no, listen to me. I love you. Thank you for caring for me. I'm tired. I'm going home. And then she called her son in, said the same thing, just about how, I love you, take good care of yourself, yada, yada. And the caregiver kind of just sort of let her be, because she thought maybe she's confused. Who knows? And the next morning she walked in and she was gone. Wow. She was gone. She died. Yeah. And I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
That happens. Some people just know.
Yeah, clearly. That was fascinating. One story, and this came up in the newsroom often, when Jimmy Carter was getting hospice care, and that went on for, more than a year. And I think there is also the perception that when you start receiving hospice care, you're going to go relatively soon. That's not always the case either. And clearly, with Jimmy Carter, that was a prime example that he continued on for more than a year.
I know. And that made me, I was so happy for him that he chose to be on hospice early enough to really get the full benefit of hospice
Huh.
and to educate, of course, like he leaves the world just continually educating, to educate the world that you can be on hospice for longer than 6 months. You can be on hospice for longer than a year. It just depends on the disease you're dying from, when you come on service. And as long as this sounds awful, but you do have to prove to Medicare that you still need to be on hospice, right? You
Right,
can't just like
right.
live forever on hospice. But as long as you are proving to Medicare, who is the boss of hospice, that
Hmm.
like the person's declining and they still need it, they can stay on for as long as they need. And Jimmy Carter was a great example of that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, and I think it certainly educated us and quite a few people around the world that you can be in hospice for quite some time and then pass, you know, many days later, many months later, potentially.
Yeah.
You've also educated folks about the fact that when someone has already passed, that a body can still make noises. And that is also something that I think would freak a lot of people out if they don't know that.
Yes, yes. Again, doesn't always happen, but it can happen. And it's basically air escaping the body. So I always try to educate families like your loved one, like their consciousness is gone, right? This is like the human shell, the human body. So think of it like, if you can, in a biological way, right? So biologically, their lungs still might have some air in there. So if you turn them, that air can still escape. And when
Mm,
it does, it can make a groan or make a gasp or make a noise. And
yeah,
it can really, really scare people.
yeah.
People can also twitch. Later on, like if their body has left and gone to the mortuary, I'm sure morticians can tell you bodies can twitch and move and do things that can really, yeah,
Yeah.
just really startle you. But it's all just the breakdown of the body's gases, the different air escaping. There is a biological and like chemical metabolic reason for it all.
Right.
Yeah.
You were clearly, I mean, you're passionate about educating so many people and I'm sure you never imagined that TikTok, social media would allow you to do this today.
Truly, truly never imagined. Never, it was not a thought in my brain. And now it's my life. I still am a hospice nurse, but I'm not a hospice nurse full time. I mostly educate online now and through my book, like you said, online through my book. It's been wild, but I'm so happy that it feels like so many millions of people are willing and ready to learn. And I've gotten countless emails, countless comments of people saying, I've watched these videos, and because of this, I was able to be there for my loved one who was dying. I finally understood what was happening.
Mm,
And that's what it's all about for me anyway.
yeah. Has there been any negative that has stood out in your mind about putting yourself out there on social media? And maybe, I'm sure comments are something that you really can't get away from. But is there one negative that sticks out in your mind?
That's a great question. I think I've gotten really lucky in the sense of, for the most part, no. But like you said, anything that goes viral, and I have specific videos, which I'll talk about in a second, that always go viral. And when anything goes viral, you always get haters.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I just try my best to pause. And it's always helped me more when I didn't respond.
Mm.
Like sometimes I don't pause and I want to tell them what I think about what they're saying. And it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. Um, but those videos, so the videos I'm most passionate about, which are my real life actively dying videos.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of heat. Some people think they're great. Some people think I'm ethically doing something wrong. And I'm willing to kind of like die on that sword because I believe in it so much. I really think people need to know what actively dying looks like. And I have had followers send me videos of their loved ones actively dying. And I have written and verbal permission to share for educational purposes only. And those are the things I get the most heat for because they always go viral because they are graphic. But to me, they're not. To me, it's like the problem is that we think this is graphic. This is the most natural thing ever. And this person isn't suffering. But because you don't know what it looks like, you think they are. And that's the problem. That's the stigma I want to try to get rid of. So it's like my biggest passion. And I will always do it, I think. Hopefully I can always do it, unless I get like shut down and I can't. But I do get some hate from that. And I understand it's a sensitive topic, but I just think it's so important. So I do it. So I do it.
I know. And too, I mean, when you talked about that death rattle, and I've seen some of those videos, if you don't know what that is, that some of those videos show what that is and you hear it. And so someone who might have to go through with that down the road, then they'll know what to expect. There was something else too that there was another one that you're very passionate about when someone has a terminal illness and someone posts, hey girl, you're gonna pull through, and it's like, no, you're not, and maybe you'll live 6 months longer, but rather than 3 months longer, but you're very passionate about that too. And I think that's also important to educate people about.
Yes. Learning how to not be not have positive, not be, what's the word where you're like toxic, but you're positive,
Right.
Like someone who's
it's kind of like a false sense of, it's like a false sense of hope,
so
but it's almost
this one comment really got me. The one when I made that video, I'm surprised I wasn't crying because like whenever I'm mad enough, I'll like cry. I'm a crier if I get mad. But like this woman wrote on a terminally ill person's page who said she was terminally ill. Everyone knew she was terminally ill. She said, my intuition tells me you're gonna beat this.
right.
Like, and it's never wrong. She wrote, and it's never wrong.
Right.
And the person, and I read it after the person had died. The person died probably 2 weeks later or something. And I just thought, what? I know you mean well. I know you mean well, but you can't say these things. And people say those things because they're so wildly uncomfortable with death and their own death that they say things like that. They think they're being helpful.
Right.
They're trying to give the person hope. And I really think in this world where unfortunately we are all going to die, we need to redefine what hope looks like. Hope does not mean we survive at all costs forever, because that's delusional. We don't. Hope is that we live the best life we can and we die the most peaceful death we can, if we even are given that path.
Right.
Some people aren't.
Yeah.
It depends, but so I do dedicate some videos to educating people about, what to say when someone's dying. Maybe don't say anything. Maybe just listen to them.
Right.
Maybe say the truth. You're scared, you're afraid, you're sad.
Right.
Truth creates connection.
Yeah. And especially because you don't even know the person.
And
you don't need to, you don't
know the person.
Yeah.
Shut your mouth.
Right.
No.
Right.
Sorry.
That's true. So you, with kind of this TikTok fame, the social media fame, then you were able to write a book, and it is a New York Times bestseller, another bestseller list as well, and it's called Nothing to Fear: Demystifying Death to Live More Fully. And I think that's the message, is that yes, you are educating about death, but it's also about living a more full life too.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that book is not just that book is for the dying, and everyone's dying. That's
right.
Truly, you don't need to be like on death's door to read that book. It's meant for everybody. It's meant for everybody. And it's beyond my wildest dreams. I'm so grateful that someone was willing to allow me to write a book, and then for my followers and their friends to buy it and appreciate it. It's just been a dream. I'm so grateful.
So Julie, what is next for you now? And I know that education will continue to be a passion for you, and continuing to take care of patients when you can too.
Yeah, I mean, I will continue hospice nursing. That's always my first love, first and foremost. I do have a workbook coming out that's going to go along with my book, Nothing to Fear. So the Nothing to Fear workbook is coming out soon. Soon I'll start promoting it. And other than that, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I have a YouTube channel now that, don't tell TikTok, but I do actually like YouTube a little more because I don't have to do these like short little snippets. I can actually do like long form videos, which is nice. So I'll just keep doing that. And my main focus is to kind of stay centered in what this all started from, which was to educate people about death and dying to help decrease fear. So if I can do that and stick to my main goal, whatever comes forth from that, I'll be happy with.
Hospice Nurse Julie McFadden, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.